Welcome to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast, where we explore real leadership stories and strategies to inspire meaningful action and purpose. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out, this podcast is here to help you lead with intent, build trust, and strengthen relationships in your organization. I'm Eric Savickas, bringing over 30 years of leadership experience from my time as a retired U.S. Army officer, university instructor, and now currently as a leadership coach to the fire service. Today, we are honored to welcome Chief Drew Hoehn, the Fire and EMS Chief of Red, White, and Blue Fire Protection District in Breckenridge, Colorado. Chief Hoehn began his fire service career in 1990 St. Louis County, Missouri, and then joined Summit County in 2003. Over the past 2 decades, he's served in a wide range of roles from firefighter, paramedic, and lieutenant to deputy chief of operations and now fire chief. In addition to his leadership at home, Chief Hoehn serves on the board of Summit in Honduras, a Breckenridge-based humanitarian nonprofit where he's helped train EMS providers in rural villages across Central America. Whether on the front lines or across borders, his commitment to service and community stands out. We'll explore his leadership journey, talk about the unique leadership structure at RWB Fire, and dive into this month's theme of effective decision-making under pressure. Chief Hoehn, welcome to the podcast. I am so happy to be able to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
So let's talk about your journey first. What first drew you into the fire service as a career, and that what eventually led you to leave the St. Louis area in Missouri to come to Summit County, where you've made it your home since 2003?
Yeah, thanks. That's a little bit of a long journey, but I'll try to be as succinct as I can. Yeah, my wife and I both grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, son of a surgeon, and this is kind of pertinent to the conversation, but my father was one of those individuals that knew from the age of 5 what he wanted to do. So, a lot of passion in his work, and so I saw what a sense of purpose looked like growing up. However, I didn't have the same clarity at age 5, and so I I had the opportunity to go to college. Great parents that supported that, believe in that level of education. So I went to school out in California at Santa Clara University. Took the opportunity to get a degree out there, majored in anthropology of all things. There is some crossover. I always tell people I specialized in cultural anthropology, and the fire service, the culture of the fire service is certainly its own study.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to approach that from an unbiased perspective, they call it non-ethnocentric, but an unbiased perspective, I think, has been a kind of intangible benefit of that education. But I never really had aspirations to be an anthropologist. I just thought it was something cool to study. Somewhere out there in California, I saw some firefighters. I had a roommate whose dad was a captain with the Palo Alto Fire Department, and just started noodling on that career a little bit and just gravitated towards it, or the idea of it at least. And so my senior year out there, I ended up kind of taken a double course load and went to a community college just up the road, Mission Community College, and started taking some fire science courses up there. And then it was just all uphill from there. My passion just grew. I was out there. I'm dating myself a little bit, but we didn't have cell phones, and I was working off of word processors. I didn't even have a personal computer, but it was during the tech boom, and as much as I wanted to stay on the West Coast, it was really expensive, and rent just skyrocketed. And so to work a full-time job to pay rent and do all the things that I wanted to do, I ended up making the decision to head back home and maybe get at least some free housing and some support to get into the fire service. So I started my fire service in St. Louis County, Missouri. Started with a really great department down there it's a developmental organization that just gave you every opportunity. And again, I was really passionate, and so I took every opportunity, learned how to drive the fire trucks, learned how to be an EMS provider, went through paramedic school, EMT school and paramedic school, and the fire academy while I was there, and then ended up getting hired on my first job, and and stayed in the county for about 7 years working as a firefighter paramedic. The next transition, I often tell people that I was a 9/11 kid. And having experienced the Western United States, I think my eyes were open and I still had the pangs of mountains, and I found myself pretty often exploring potential opportunities anywhere west. I ended up working on September 11th, drove into the fire station that morning. We did 24-hour shifts back then, and
Mhm.
have pretty vivid uh, recollections of that day and sitting there and watching TV all day. Long story short, it was one of those inflection points in life that just gave you pause and reminded me, at least, and my wife to live our lives. And shortly thereafter, we had a daughter. Our daughter was 6 months old at the time, but an opportunity came up here in Summit County, and I applied for it. It was actually a promotion to a lieutenant's position, which was a little bit of a reach for me at the time, but I had a really good captain that I was working for, and he helped develop me, and he instilled a lot of confidence in me. And so I applied for it and ended up getting that job offer. And we threw caution to the wind. I think in a week's time, we put our house on the market, and I loaded up the U-Haul and found a place to rent, and we made the move out here. And my wife will say that it's the best thing that we ever did together, and it's one of our more proud moments because it's really just opened up a world, a world for us that we wouldn't have had, and our kids. We have 2 kids now. So that's a little bit of how I landed here in Summit County.
So, from a leadership perspective, you said that you were firefighter paramedic back in Missouri, and you had a really good captain that was a mentor and probably, talked to you about leadership roles. Had you experienced any leadership? What kind of got you passionate enough to apply to a company level officer position in Summit County if you didn't really have much experience, or did you get an opportunity in Missouri to lead at all?
Yeah, I got a little bit of opportunity. The culture, at least then, and I don't know if it's the same way, but it was a very, older, traditional, ingrained fire service where, it was a little bit of that, hey, shut up, kid, sit in the corner. We'll let you know when you've got enough time on the job when we're ready to hear what you think, kind of thing. And while there is some value to that, that really didn't vibe with me at the time. And I wanted to go out and explore things. And so what I do recall was my fire chief at the time, the state was offering some fire service or some fire officer courses. And, I looked at it as I came from education, and I just thought, well, no harm, no foul. I can go take a class. But because I wasn't really in their succession plan or leadership continuum at the time, I was pretty new. The organization didn't support that. And so I went out and signed up for it myself and paid for it myself. The fire chief came back around because he got a little pressure from some of the other captains, and he reimbursed me for it, which was great. But I ended up taking, these Fire Officer 1, Fire Officer 2 courses in Missouri at a pretty young age. And my captain at the time was a little bit of the same mindset. He was a kind of an up and comer, and I always thought he was a bit of a. I make this distinction between like rock stars and superstars, and so rock stars are those folks that are just really good at their job. They're always going to be good at that job, but maybe that's the job for them. You have that driver that's just excellent and has eyes in the back of their head, but they have no greater aspiration in life than to be a driver, and you need those people. The superstars are the ones that, you just know that they're going to be a fire chief sometime, and they're upwardly mobile. And so my captain was a superstar, and he would provide me opportunities. I don't know if he saw the same thing in me or not. That would be a little egotistical to even assume, but what he did do was he gave me a lot of opportunities and would sort of, talk me through some of his decisions. So I understood that critical decision-making process, and
Hmm.
just very appreciative. And then he was supportive of me shooting for the moon a little bit. And he took the time with me and provided me some scenarios, some preparation for a promotional process. Always be grateful for him.
Yeah, it sounds like all the things that a great mentor would do. So you take on your first company officer role at Summit County. In hindsight, do you think it was a net positive and beneficial that you came in from the outside as Lieutenant Hoehn and not one of the guys, Drew, that's was on the crew, and maybe a lot of that that hard buddy to boss transition, you you had the benefit of being new to the organization and not having to go through that.
That's a great question. I think if in a little bit when we talk about like what defines my leadership style and how I regard our employees, I mean, I was a fish out of water. I will just say that I was completely unprepared for the position as much as I thought I was. My life experience could be summed up and I have to learn from my mistakes, whereas there are other leaders who just intuitively get it. That's not me. I have to learn from my mistakes, and I made a lot of them. One of the great benefits, though, is that now from my vantage point, I can see the new superstars and I can see the pitfalls ahead of them. And, what I have to offer them is conversation and highlight things and let them know what they're about to step in so they don't make the same mistakes that I do. But more specific to your question, coming in from the outside, I, they if anybody ever tells you that, oh, we really are excited to bring you into the organization because we want your fresh infusion of ideas, don't bite, because it's really not true, and it's almost harder to navigate that than if you are the internal candidate or internal hire, because you already know their systems, you already know their culture. I knew one way to do it, and that was the St. Louis County way, and that was markedly different than where we were in Summit County at the time. And so they call it recognition prime based decision making, and that's what I was going
Mm,
off of, was what I knew.
yeah.
But it did create some tension points and some tension points with other leaders in the organization that I had to go back and repair those relationships. And we did. One of the ones that I'm most proud of is an individual who ended up being the fire chief at that organization. He and I, once we got into positions where we, for lack of a better term, held the keys to the city and were able to implement some vision that we had discussed for the last 10 years. He was the greatest partner. It started out as a pretty damaged relationship because we were both, and we'll both readily admit it, we were both really young and really immature in our leadership.
Yeah. So I want to fast forward, if I could, 20-ish so years.
Just skip
So
the
you
middle section.
Yeah, you company officer, and you learned lessons and you grew from there, and took on numerous other operations related roles and operations chief, but eventually becoming the fire chief. Talk to me about the unique dual leadership structure that you guys have there at RWB Fire.
Sure.
If I'm understanding correctly, you're the fire chief, while Jay Nelson is titled the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the department, and fire marshal. How does that structure, having two leaders essentially at the top with slightly different titles, work for you guys?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that, and I can speak for Jay on this, that it's really cool. And it works for us. As we say, we're not out there beating the drum on this. We're not going around to conferences and preaching this particular leadership model, but it came about a little bit organically. I'll walk you down that road if you'd like. So Jay and I were both, at the time, we were both deputy chiefs in the organization, and we worked for a fire chief. Jay was the deputy chief of administration, and I was the deputy chief of operations. And so the division of labor then is no different truly than it is now, with a few exceptions. So the fire chief at the time had decided to retire. And as a stopgap, the board, our governing body, the board of directors, I don't know if they didn't want to pick favorites or make a decision at the time. We had certainly been through a lot as an organization, and I think they really just wanted to get out of a board meeting, quite frankly. So very abruptly, they appointed Jay and I as co-interim fire chiefs, and essentially the message was keep the ship afloat, keep doing the good work that you're doing, keep moving, keep maintain the quality improvement mindset that defines who we are, and we'll meet again to talk about the future. And so Jay and I started managing the organization. We, at the time, I mean, if I'm being very transparent, we had a pretty fractured relationship. The leadership was not really one that that brought a team together. And so Jay and I had to go out and have a difficult conversation and just say, hey, I know that we both have the interest of the organization at heart. We have to get over some of this older stuff, and can we move forward? And we both committed to doing that. The board then, well, let me get back into some of the decision process. So in reference to a little bit of the trauma that we had been through, and also some personal factors that Jay and I both experienced, and I'll just speak to my own. I ended up sort of around that time or a little bit before then, ended up having open heart surgery for an aortic, it was called an aortic root aneurysm that was detected in our fire department physicals. So I like to tell people that this fire department has saved my life, which it really has. I'm internally indebted. We invested in bringing in an outside company that uses ultrasound technique in the first year, 2018, I believe, that we brought them in. They caught it. It wasn't at a critical place yet, so it wasn't until November of 2021 I had to have surgery. So what that does, as I'm sure you can imagine, is it really upends your world. And so you do a lot of introspection, a lot of processing pretty clearly and pretty quickly what's important and what's not important. And for me, what I landed on was what was important to me was the people that I really care about. I mean, I care about our people here, but that was my family, and making sure that I do everything I can to be present for them and to be supportive of them. Jay had his own experience. That's his story to tell. But where we converged on that was we sat down, and I think independently we both decided that neither of us wanted to shoulder what we knew to be then the stress, the impact, and the inability to really find good work-life balance in the traditional binary fire chief model. And so we both decided that we were not interested in, at that time, putting our hat in the ring to be the fire chief. And that was, I think for both of us, that was a bit of a 90-degree turn. We had both been, I think, working in that direction. I had certainly been working in that direction, going out to the National Fire Academy and getting the education and training, building the network and the cohort and the support of other fire chiefs. But I think, at least for myself, I'm really proud of that decision. So we let the board know that. They went out and conducted a nationwide hiring process. We had thought we had 3 finalists, 3 really awesome people. They included us in that discussion, that deliberation, which I'm just so grateful for. But we had thought we had found our person, and then in the 11th hour, some complications came up with that individual. Board then decided to we were coming into the holidays, into December, which is our busiest time around here.
Mm-hmm.
And so they decided to take a little pause on it and maybe revisit it in the spring. And, around that time, Jay and I talked again, and we said, hey, this is working for me. Is this working for you? Yeah, this is really working for me. And what was working was that we were able to support each other in some very distinct work-life balance. And so when one of us wants to take some time off, the other one commits to covering the house, answering the phone, shouldering the load. And it really allowed us to model the behavior that we're asking of our own people, but also that the National Fire Service has said that they're moving to. I went through the Executive Fire Officer program out at the National Fire Academy when it was a 4-year program, and that was the entire 4th year, work-life balance. How do we change the paradigm of the fire chief? How do we stop killing fire chiefs from the stress? We know that stress leads to certain other health issues, cancers, mental health issues, presumably suicides, those kind of things. So we that was maybe an intangible benefit, but we certainly were excited to model that behavior as well. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that it sounds very interesting, and it sounds like you guys got it got it figured out, at least to some degree. Do you think it only works because you and Jay were already deputy chiefs in the department and you were focused on ops and EMS and he was focused on prevention and some other things? And so then naturally now as interim co-fire chiefs and then now with the specific labels, more formal labels as CEO and you as fire chief, if something comes up and it looks and smells and feels ops related, that it naturally falls into your bucket. And then if something is more prevention or logistics or admin related, it might be into Jay's bucket. But what if it, like, do you think it would have worked the same if, let's say, you and Jay were both external candidates and you both came into the department clean with no history, no deputy chief experience in those specific areas, and you were just two fire chiefs? Does that make it much harder then?
That's a great question. I can't really say. I think it's a very situational. What I do know is that when we went to the board with this proposal, we met with, we certainly agreed between ourselves that this was working for us. We went and met with staff. We did a lot of good things at the time. We were taking some big swings for the organization. So maybe even some low hanging fruit, to be honest with you, but it went a long way with staff and they felt like we were very action oriented. When we went to staff and asked them if it was working for them and labor group, they were all, we had broad support there. So we went back to the board with a formal proposal. The kind of humorous thing was they had us go through a promotional process. So we sat through a full day of interviews and Jay and I did individual interviews. I think we did 3 different panels individually and then we came back and did one together. So it was like yours, mine, and ours. But it is very situational. One of the things that we pointed out to the board was that, hey, if you bring in another fire chief, which is fine if that's what you decide to do, it's still our Rolodex. Jay was born and raised here in the community. I have been working here for 20 years, and we had built the relationships with the town council members, the mayor, the county commissioners, the sheriff, all of the stakeholders and all of the interest groups. And so I think we had a real strength, a real advantage from, being internal and having grown with the organization and grown with the community. That's a little bit why we don't go out and beat the drum, because we do say that, this works really well for us and it works really well for us now. But when one of us retires, we're not dead set on maintaining this model. We may very well go back to the traditional hierarchical leadership model. In terms of division of labor, one of the ways that I describe the benefit of what we're doing, I make the analogy of the nuclear football that goes around with the president wherever he or she are at the time. But, I think from a very simplistic standpoint, it takes 2 keys to launch that nuke,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so even though we have our lanes, so to speak, we tackle all the big problems together. So if we have a big personnel issue, we consult together. We make sure that we agree, we have alignment. It's a little bit of 2 heads are better than one. When we get into, like, we're in the middle of collective bargaining agreement negotiations right now with our labor group, and we're about to that will drive our budget. And so we're about to get into budget. We tackle those together. And so we need 2 keys, and we actually say there's a third key, which is our finance officer. So Laura comes into just about every conversation that's of major significance in our organization. And we made sure that all 3 of us are in alignment and comfortable with whatever it is that we're agreeing to or we're proposing. And the real luxury there is when we go back to our board of directors or a governing body, we can make that statement and it almost gives you some immediate validity in your ask, because
Hmm.
if we're not going to do anything that one of the 3 of us is not comfortable with, none of us are going to take excessive risk with either the finances of the organization, the trust of the community, or the safety of the community.
Yeah.
And so we very rarely we don't often have to defend our proposal or ask with the governing body as a singular fire chief might have to do. So we see that as a pretty significant outcome of this.
So I have to ask to keep the perception of you guys being co-leaders of the department, did you each keep your division chief offices? Or did you rock, paper, scissors for who got the
No,
chief's office?
that's a great question, and there's some depth to it. So a concept that I latched onto when we were both working for a previous fire chief was this concept of proximity bias. So we're in a little bit of an older building, and my office was down the hall. I'm now in the previous fire chief's office, and Jay's office is right next door. So he had certainly had a lot closer proximity to the fire chief. And so just in terms of like engagement and
Hmm.
communication, not intentional, but I very much saw this concept of proximity bias manifesting in our leadership group. And so when we had the ability, I brought it up to the fire chief at the time and he just brushed me, stay in your office or whatever. Um, so when we had the ability, I talked to Jay about it, and I said we need to go shoulder to shoulder. And this is the corner office. He's next door. This unquestionably has better views. I offered it to him, and I said you can have this office. I'll go into yours, but I want to get shoulder to shoulder so that we don't experience the same proximity bias that we did before.
You would have blown me away if you said that we adopted the Google model and tore down the walls, and he and I are communally joined here in
Yeah.
this one space, sitting on exercise balls in the middle of the floor.
I think we're progressively minded, but that might be, I don't know how the rest of the organization would have responded to that. But I will tell you that we've worn out the carpet, no doubt, I mean, it's really just a dog ear around my door and that's his door. And we are in each other's doorways. I can't countless times a day.
So one thing I wanted to ask about, and maybe this has been created through some of the space that you have as a co-leader in your leadership model there at the department, but you're on the board of the Summit of Honduras, which helps train EMS providers in rural areas in Central America. How did you get involved in that? What lessons does that allow you to bring back to your department as a leader?
Yeah, thanks. Summit in Honduras has been a really rewarding uh, opportunity for me. It was a little bit serendipitous how it came about. The founders of it's a nonprofit 501c3. The founders live here in Breckenridge. They're an older couple, Maggie and Wally Ducaye. They're fantastic people. But when we moved out to Summit County in 2003, somewhere along the way, my wife and Maggie, who are years apart in age, gravitated towards each other and became kind of kindred spirits and friends. And this was their relationship. I got a phone call one day from Maggie out of the blue, and I don't think I answered it because I didn't recognize the number and listened to her message. She asked to have coffee, and I said, well, of course, little sweet Maggie, why wouldn't I have coffee with her? So I met her for coffee, and I think I was a battalion chief at the time. And we sat down, and she's from New Jersey, I believe, is where she's born and raised. So she's very direct, very East Coast. And she said, I bought an ambulance for a village in Honduras, and I need you and 6 firefighters to go down in 2 weeks and train them how to be ambulance attendants. And so this was this huge, like, I mean, if you think about it, really what she was asking us to do was go teach an EMT class in a week, given a week's time to a number of people that we don't speak their language. So, but where I was in life at that time, I was really kind of craving that type of opportunity. I read a book much later, really when I was at home recovering from my surgery about when people are on their deathbed and what they say was most important to them, it was a sense of service.
Hmm.
And I know we have a sense of service in the fire service, but it's also our job and we're also getting compensated to do it. Everybody has their why as to why they got into this business, but I will say if I'm being very honest, like mine was more action oriented at the time. Like this is exciting. It's a little bit dangerous and it's a big unknown. Nobody in my family ever was a firefighter. My dad was a doctor. And so kind of getting back to Maggie, like I was craving kind of an opportunity. So it was a quick yes for me. We rounded up a group of folks and we went down there and we were up to the task. I think we did another trip after that, and I became the point person for our fire department. We aligned with a fire department down in Santa Barbara, Honduras. So we started to go down there and train with them. And I think after the second trip, Maggie and Wally asked me to join the board. And again, I was on this trajectory to maybe be a fire chief someday. Chief Fire Officer certification, it's assessment of your professional development. And one of the areas in there is like what's your community engagement, what's your community service. So I also had a little bit of a box to check. So I've been on the board ever since. I actually got an email from Maggie today, and our mission has changed. I mean, we trained with firefighters for a while, and then this last trip we went down in January and we built eco stoves. So nothing to do with the fire department other than, good hands and good manual laborers.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Drew. What's a leadership lesson that you've pulled from Honduras or from that experience, or maybe just even being on the board of that organization, that you wouldn't have ever picked up in a lifetime of EFO seminars and chief fire officer classes and certifications and things like that? What's something that's maybe a takeaway that has been embodied in your leadership now?
Yeah, I think it's judgment. Check your judgment. Make sure your biases are not too strong. You're not judging people. Because I will say that when we went down there, the assumption was that this is a third world country and that Americans are gonna come down and save the day and teach you how to be firefighters. And the reality of the situation is when we got down there, well, one, they're much more disciplined. They're government agency, so it's a little bit more militaristic, or it's much more militaristic, but they're more disciplined than we are. And we did some training with them. We went back the second year and we decided to do an evolution, and it was just a simple evolution of like, you're going to pull up here, we're going to pull hoses off your fire apparatus, and then we're going to put water on this building over here. And these guys were playing chess while we were playing checkers, and we didn't know it. And they deployed in probably 30 seconds flat that would have taken, the U.S. Fire Service maybe 3 minutes flat to get water. And it was just really a good reminder. Their leadership was tight, and just a good reminder, like, not to judge a book by the cover. And applying that back to leadership's positions in the fire service, there's a lot of really good leaders out there that if you didn't take a minute to get to know them, you could certainly be pretty dismissive of them right away. I learned that even further in the EFO program with some of the leaders there. They're an amazing group
Hmm.
of people. But if I crossed them on the sidewalk, I would have just thought, oh, yeah, another firefighter.
Yeah. Good. I like what you said about biases and stuff and judgment. Really powerful. As we start to wrap it up here a little bit, a couple more questions. As you're looking out on the horizon from your corner office there in Breckenridge, what do you see as the future for RWB Fire?
Yeah, I mean, we're at a real luxury right now. Future is bright. We're very secure from an administrative standpoint. We went to the taxpayers this year. We're able to secure some long range funding, great support from the community. We're going to go into next year's budget with some really ambitious plans. Our board's supportive of it, framed everything as a generational ask, a generational approach. So I think that's such a great luxury for both Jay and I to know that we can leave this place and it's going to be secure. I think I had a new firefighter in my office 2 days ago, and they do their first year training and development program. Before they're signed off, they have to kind of make the rounds and talk to all the leadership, have a conversation. And I usually like them to come in with some questions. But this one in particular had a really great question. And she asked, if there was one thing you'd like different in our department, what would it be? And it is a leadership piece. And it's, we've been touting this one team concept, executive leadership, labor leadership, line leadership, and governing body leadership, that we're all on the same team, recognizing that we all have different roles, different jobs. Some of us are going to be decision makers on things and some of us aren't. There's an adage, it's not a fire service adage, it's just a management adage, that you may spend 80% of your time on 20% of your problem.
Hmm.
I think that we don't have 20% problems here, but if in an organization the size of about 70 people, I'd say we got about 5 people that I would love to really bring more into the fold of the one team mindset. Kind of going back to where we started and the mistakes that I made coming through my career, I intentionally let people know that everybody in this organization has the opportunity to grow. They're going to get feedback. We may have a hard conversation, but you will not be kicked to the curb and you will have an opportunity to grow here. Whether you capitalize on that or not is up to you. I think we have some really great self-regulation in our organization where those people that do get it, and this is really the silver bullet of what does get it mean?
Hmm.
One of the concepts that I've latched onto very recently is emotional intelligence or emotional maturity. And so in that spectrum, we definitely have people that are up here, are 5 or maybe here, but they're new, they're 3 to 5 year employees. And so we have a task, we have a responsibility to help develop them and help grow them. That's our future. That's where we're putting our energy. I think that everybody is capable of growing. What they say about emotional intelligence is your IQ you're born with and you
Hmm.
can't change that. Your EQ you can definitely change, but it takes support. So our roles as chief officers are quite clearly to remove obstacles and provide the resources that are necessary to do that. We lean heavily on the line officers, our battalion chiefs, our company officers, and quite frankly, our labor relationship is, that's one that I would go and do a presentation on because I am uniquely proud of our relationship, but also proud that our labor leadership is in alignment with where we want to be as an organization, where we want to go with our culture and where we want to go developing leaders and things like that. Then the other thing is like doing things differently, like trying new things. I just sent out an email yesterday offering, Jay and I talked about it, so we put our 2 noggins together, offering anybody that's captain or EMS specialist, basically company officer level or higher that has aspirations to be a chief officer, to sit in our budget discussions that are historically limited to Jay, myself, and our finance officer because we make tough decisions in there. We have conversations that maybe we're not always comfortable exposing the entire organization to because we do have to make hard decisions. We do have to place a little bit of judgment in there. But since offering that 1 or 2 days ago, I think I have 8 people in the organization right now that want to sit in
That's great.
and see how the sausage gets made, take a peek behind the curtain. So, hopefully bringing people up into the fold and doing things a little bit differently than they've done in the past. And so those are really rewarding things. Those are really exciting things. When you come into work every day, what do you look forward to? For me, it's like the opportunity to be creative, the opportunity to express some vision, and then try to bring those things to fruition and leave it, a little cliche, but leave it better than you found it.
Yeah. Yeah, all good stuff, and I'm gonna put you on the spot here one more time as the last question, and you've alluded to what maybe your answer throughout this discussion, whether you were talking about emotional intelligence or sound judgment or curiosity or whatever. But you mentioned there are rock stars and superstars. But give me one more thing that separates a good fire service leader from a great leader.
For me, and this is where this comes with the responsibility of the job. And I'd say for Jay and I both, what we're looking for, the easy part of the job, when we promote people, what we tell them is you've already instilled our confidence in the easy part of the job. And that's the day-to-day stuff. That's running calls. That's, going out, making the hard decisions on those critical incidents. Like that's nuts and bolts. Running your crew management, running your day to day, when you're going to go to the store, when you're going to go to training, making sure that you're supporting, your crew's training needs for the day. If somebody's trying to become a driver operator, making sure that you're helping them with that. That's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is the people stuff. When things get difficult, if we look for a couple things, one, we look for courage. Are you going to address, confront, be direct with those growth areas? Are you going to shy away from it? And when you do that, we're looking for authenticity. We're looking for vulnerable leaders. We're looking for people that lead heart forward and are not going to just slam the book at somebody.
Mm-hmm.
That's us. That's who we want to be. Those are the people that we're promoting. Not everybody agrees with us, and not all fire departments do it the same way. Some other fire departments, they want that military rigid, like, this is how the hog's going to eat the cabbage kind of thing. And that works well for people, but that's not the culture that we've built. That's not the culture that we want to develop. I don't think it makes us soft. I went down to train today. Our people know from a task level the work that they have to do, and they're very good at it. But expectations, setting clear expectations, and then accountability to those expectations. Those are the conversations that we have. When we talk about those 5 individuals or the 20% or whatever it is, in the fire service, that all occurs at the kitchen table. That's where the gossip is. That's where toxicity can breed or develop. And so the direction that I've given battalion chiefs who have then been directed to give that to their company officers or captains is that I don't expect you to go in and slam your fist on the table and say, this will stop now, because there are some healthy dimensions to that, allowing people to express themselves. But what I do expect is that they go in, they speak truth to it, value to the conversation. If they know something else to be truthful, speak truth to it.
Mm-hmm.
And challenge people, but add value to the conversation. And I think we'll get there as long as they do that.
And maybe another benefit of the co-leadership model you have is you say to Jay, hey, Jay, those 5, that 20%, those are yours in your bucket. I get the 80%.
No, that's the easy, but there's no easy buttons around here.
Well, Chief, hey, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and leadership lessons with us today. I know you said that you and Jay aren't out shopping around that leadership model, but certainly seems to me like you've got some good things going on there. So definitely keep that up. For our listeners, if you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team or anyone who might benefit from these leadership takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast and leave a review on your favorite platform. For more leadership resources and tools, visit convergentimpact.com. And until next time, lead well, take care of your people, and keep setting the example.